we should definitely make this roll, but it is a roll.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Improvisation in Role-Playing panel, whether you are here in the Dragonfly Theater at PAX or watching it online while it is being streamed. For those of you in the room, give yourselves a round of applause.
Yay!
You got to the part of PAX where you get to sit for an hour, and that is great. Yes, indeed, it is the best. So well, I'm going to ask you for just a couple of more rounds of applause, just so I can get the water level in the room here. Round of applause if you've been to the Improvisation in Role-Playing panel before. Wow. And clap if it's your first time at the Improvisation in Role-Playing panel. Fantastic. Welcome. You are part of a wondrous tradition of talking about improvisation in role-playing, which is why you're here. So what we're going to do over the course of the next probably 58 minutes or so is we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to have a general discussion about what is improvisation, you probably already know what role-playing is, but what is improvisation, what is role-playing, how do the two interact, what are techniques that you can draw from the concept of improvisation, the artistic art form of improvisation, to make your games better, more fun, easier to run, less stressful when your players want to not do the thing you want them to do. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here to talk about this for about an hour. Probably around 20 minutes left, depending on how our conversation is going. We're going to have a Q&A as well. I think there is a microphone right there. And so we'll be answering your questions at the end. I will remind you all of this before the Q&A, but the only thing I ask at the Q&A is what you say must end in a question mark. And we will then do our best to answer it. So I think that's everything that we need to worry about. So let's get started here. Yeah. So let's talk about our panelists. Who are they? I will start with myself because I am currently talking. My name is John Serpico. I'm the moderator. I do improv. I produce it and perform it and direct it at Improv Boston. And I'm also a professional game master through Tour Guide Games. And I am the GM of the Live Play Blittle League. So that's what I do, and it is very fun. Let's start this way and go down this way.
Hi, everybody. My name is Austin Habershaw. I am a science fiction and fantasy author who has published 4 novels, about 25 short stories in various places. My novel series is called The Oldest Trick. It's out through Harper Voyager. I have been playing role-playing games for about 30 years or so. I've run and played in almost every game you can imagine. I am also a college English professor, and I also am a former improviser. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Samantha Lavangie. I am also an improviser who performs with Improv Boston and Magic the Gathering, the show. I also have been in Knights of Prospect, run by our lovely GM Serpico here. And I also, myself, have GM'd a number of different games, leaning heavily onto fully improvised one-shots and two-shots when I can get willing participants.
Hi, I'm Bobby Smithny, performer and director with Improv Boston. Also, many years of serious nerd cred. I have beat Battletoads, so I'll just put that one out there. Not to brag, but I have beaten that.
I didn't even ask for applause, and they gave you applause. That's great.
It's best when they don't beg for it.
Hey, nothing better than that earned pop. All right. I'm John Parrish. I'm a novelist writing under the pseudonym Jack Mahoney, the Adrian Cervantes thriller series. I've also contributed pop culture writing to McSweeney's, Overthinking It, Decider. Have also been rolling dice in some form or another for a little over 30 years. Have also done improv at Improv Boston, where I know these folks from, or at the college level. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So those are your panelists, everybody. Fantastic. So, yeah, the goal here is to really just give everyone a nice broad sampling of the concept of improvisation and then how we can use it. So let's start there. Question number 1 for everybody. Let's advance the graphic to general discussion. We are there. Is what is improvisation?
I'd like to start with what it isn't.
Ooh, please do.
It is not acting, you know? So if you're here to like, how do I do a better voice when I game? Like, that's not what we're talking about. Improvisation is a way of kind of communicating with your friends and a way of communicating, especially while you're gaming, that is just about a community doing it together. And so if you're here for like, hey, how can I do a sillier voice for my, Hobbit character, you're in the wrong spot. This is about how we GM and how you can kind of help the GM if you're not the game master themselves.
And I want to tag in on that real quick because we've been doing this panel for
I
Too
think
long.
this is 5 years now.
I feel like it's more than 5.
Let's call it 20.
20 years. We've been doing this panel since before you were born.
20 years. Since before PAX.
Yeah.
And in that time, like the idea of improv and role playing has I think gone from just like an interesting idea that people were aware of to now with shows like Matt Mercer, like Will Wheaton, like the various online Twitch and live stream. People are more aware of it, and it's important to draw the distinction Bobby drew. It's like people think improv are like, oh, do I have to like be a professional actor all of a sudden? Do I have to put on this like really complex and really well-performed character? And the answer is no, you don't need to go that far.
It's also not about being funny, to add on to another layer of what it is not, but to then move on to what it is. Improvisation for me, personally, is a set of parameters that help you just build on top of the ideas that get put onto the table. Even if you feel as a GM like that idea runs contrary to maybe what you've planned, it's a way of kind of collaborating and building on a story with the other people in the room with you.
I think I really like to use the word collaboration because I really think that's the central crux of this, is that in the quote-unquote traditional role-playing game structure, there is a sort of defined role for each of the people at the table, and it tends or can be adversarial very easily, in which the game master sits at the head of the table and controls your fate, and you fight against the game master to overcome these obstacles. And what we're suggesting is not necessarily that you don't have obstacles to overcome, but the goal of an improv-inspired role-playing experience is not to like win or overcome, but to collaboratively work together, GM and player, to create the most fun you can possibly have at the table. And the concept, the very concrete concept, because we've been talking in very vague terms, I want to add a concrete concept to this that I think will be very useful, particularly for those who don't have experience with improv, which is the idea of an offer. And what an offer is on the improv stage is when you're standing on stage, you don't have any concrete plan. Somebody gets on stage and says, "Oh my God, your hair's on fire." That's an offer. What that means is they are indicating something about the scene that you now can build off of. And your goal is always to build off of it, not to knock it down and say like, well, now it's not. Because then where do you go from there, right? It doesn't help. That becomes adversarial in the same sense that when you are GMing a campaign and a character or a player comes to you and says, "Hey, can I be the long-lost prince of this country?" That's an offer. And you as the GM have an option there. You can say, "No," and then nothing interesting happens. Or you can say, "Oh, yes." And then you get to build off of it. And that flow should continue, right? Because when the GM says to the player, says to the player something along the lines of, I don't know, the writing on the side of this building is in a language you've never seen before. And you go, is it possible it could be in that library we were in like last session? That's the player picking up on an offer the GM is making, right? And even if the GM didn't specifically have plans about how they would translate this, the idea is the two of you or the two groups, the players and the GMs and the players among themselves, receive, accept, and heighten those offers in such a way so that the story, first of all, seems more organic. Everyone seems as though they have a stake in what's going on. And often the story goes very interesting ways, and the play becomes very, very engaging.
I'll add on a little bit to that because everything that everybody said is 100% accurate and 100% cool, and also probably very scary. Because for those of you that have been GMing for a while, and you may be used to GMing out of a big thing of notes, and you have prepped so that you are not caught off guard, we are essentially asking you to perpetually be ready to be off guard, which is a very scary thing. And so I think about it this way, and this is like hearing it from all of these other panelists really reinforces why this can be super, super fun, is let's say your goal was, yeah, your characters are walking through some ruined city and there's writing on a building, it's in a language they don't know. You have a plan for how your players are gonna figure out that language. But you know they're going to figure it out eventually. But your plan is maybe they got to go to this other place and defeat some ancient thing and answer a riddle. But if they say, hey, is it in that library that's slowly filling with water that we went to last week? You can say yes and send them back there because they found it interesting. And at the end of the day, they're still going to translate what's on the wall. They're still going to do the thing that you want them to do. They're just going to do it in a different way.
We've all been in games where it doesn't go well. And you go, oh, why was that session with all the same people not as much fun? And it's because, the person running it probably said no to you a lot. No, I don't want that idea, I don't want that. I have this stack of papers that I'm going through. And then, you don't understand it. Why is everybody on their cell phones? Why do people have their cell phone out when it's not their turn? Oh, that's weird. Why do I have to remind everybody everything? Because you're not doing it together. Right? And it can start really small. As a specific example, my favorite things as a GM, just when they run into a person that you weren't anticipating, it's not a major character, have them name it. You meet the bartender. What's her name? What's her name? Eloise. She's Eloise. Yeah, and she's got a pet that's, she's got a weird animal pet. Falcon, a big old falcon. It's an abnormally large falcon. And a what? Named Herbert. The falcon named Herbert.
Yeah, you get the idea. Yeah. I want to just throw in real quick. Also, the players can say no a lot, and that also screws things up, because I don't want to make this sound like it's all on the GM, because it definitely is not. Players say no when they think if they say yes, they are going to fail or be embarrassed or otherwise lose. It is the GM's job to make sure that the players are aware that there is no such thing as this being not fun. So when I ask a player, the player's like, hey, can I do this thing? Say it's a space game. I remember one instance this happened. It's well, the only way you can get out in space is if you get into one of the escape pods. Because of the way the ship's been damaged, that escape pod is not going to have a whole lot of life support. And the player recoiled, because they were like, oh, that might mean I die. And I said to them, no, it might mean this is really exciting. It doesn't mean you die, it means this is gonna be fun.
Yeah. These characters aren't you. Make some weird decisions. Because your decisions in real life have consequences, and they don't in the role-playing universe.
Well, they do, but just fun ones.
But the fun ones. Well, let's go down that hole a little bit, because one thing in theatrical improv, if you actually clap if you've ever seen live improv on stage.
Oh, yay!
Nice. So, on stage, again, you'll get that example that kind of Austin gave is, maybe two people are on stage and one says, oh my goodness, your hair's on fire. And the hope is that the other person says, oh my goodness, it is, but you gotta help me put it out. Or, oh yes, do you like it? I just had it styled this way. Or whatever it is. But there is a level of trust that exists on that stage. The only reason those two people are okay performing together is because they both know that if one of them makes the offer, the other person's not going to take that offer and stomp it into the stage and say, no, your hair's not on fire, and also I don't know you, and also we are in the inky blackness of space. They're not going to do that. They're going to build, and there's a level of trust. One thing that I see, and I think we've all seen, is that sometimes there is that conflict, or the players fear that the GM will kill them for some reason. And if that exists, it's really hard to do any of this fun improv stuff. So let's go down that hole, which is, what can GMs and players do to create a trusting, emotionally safe space where the players are willing to risk their characters' lives for excitement?
One thing that, oh, sorry, Sam.
How you go?
Okay.
I'll go next.
One thing that helps with that, and I think this is a theme we'll also come back to a lot on the panel, is that for all that we're talking about improvisation, there is a lot of groundwork that can and should be laid in order to make improv easier. One of the things that's become much more popular in recent years is a session zero before a campaign starts to set up the expectations of a game. This is for folks not familiar, it's a session where no actual play happens, but it can be like where everyone creates characters, and also where you talk about like the setting of the game and also the tone. So things like, all right, this is going to be a game of, scoundrels in space going on heists and doing jobs, but like it's a lighthearted game of scoundrels in space going on heists, or it's a grim, gritty game of scoundrels in space going on heists. And just setting those expectations so people know what they're in for and people can make more comfortable offers, to come back to that term, can forestall a lot of problems later on. Because if people come in with vastly different expectations, even like, one of the more, popular and standard games, people can have vastly different expectations of what a given D&D game is going to be like. So sitting down and saying like, all right, this is a game where we're really focusing on exploring and discovering this wondrous new world, or this is a game that's very much focused on like building power and taking on bigger and bigger challenges. Just very different expectations that it hurts you nothing to communicate those early and build those collaboratively.
Absolutely, +1 to a session zero. They are some of my favorite things. Whether it happens as a group or even one-on-one, especially for new players, a session zero can be a great time to set expectations with your GM or ask all those questions that you have about how you should set up a character. Another thing I want to mention is we've talked a lot about saying no being bad, and kind of I think the implication there is saying yes being good, and saying. So that's what the idea of improv does not mean that as a GM or a player you have to say yes to everything that is going to happen. You have to say yes to the fact that the people in the room with you care about it. Like, they care about their characters, care about the stakes, care about the things that they want to happen. And even you as a GM, you care about the story that's being told, you care about... So I think for me, establishing mutual trust between a GM and their players and among players is about acknowledging that even if the thing you propose, even if you said, I'm sorry, you can't be the prince of this small country right off the bat, like, a way to honor that, even if they're going to fail at the end, like, or even if they try, like, they can try and they can fail, and that's not saying no. Your job is to make the journey there, regardless of the outcome, a journey that people care about and honors the things that people care about.
We've all been in those campaigns where somebody's acting like a jerk, and I think a lot of the times it's because they think they can't possibly impact the story any. That's where that adversarial relationship gets. Like, no matter what I do, I'm going to be saving this town, so I'm lighting fires, and I'm punching my fellow characters, and I'm stealing their stuff. Because nuts to you, GM, because nothing I do gets me off of your pre-planned story, right? It creates this adversarial relationship where if you have a person like that in your campaign, you can talk to them and say, hey, look, what I want to do is like, I want to tell this story. Are you okay with it? Like, talk to them. All right, and you can make it better. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think even as players start to make their characters is where you can figure out how to get buy-in. Because what we're kind of talking about at this point is getting the players to buy in to whatever it is you as a GM are trying to make into a game. And the way you get players to buy in is by, as the GM, buying in on their character concept. And looking at what their character is and say, like, okay, this character is cool, this is what this person wants to do. And there's a lot of ways in a lot of different games, especially now, like even in D&D, the personality traits, the flaws, the bonds, the ideals. First of all, never roll for those on tables. That's just my personal opinion, but it's a very strong opinion. You should make them up yourself, because those are messages to the GM about what you want your character to experience and do, right? So your bond, your flaw, that's the way you want your character to get in trouble. And folks, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this conversation is that role-playing games are at their most fun when shit goes sideways. And the only way an adventure goes sideways is when both the players and the GM agree that it going sideways will be awesome. Because the players can always say, no, I'm not going in that room with the evil idol. Clearly that's dangerous. And the GM can say, there's absolutely no way you can scale the wall of the unholy temple. The answers being yes create nonsense that you couldn't possibly have planned and ends up being the most exciting, dangerous, and ridiculous stuff. Those are the stories, and you know what I'm talking about. Those are the stories you end up talking about for years later. The ones where every adventure goes smoothly by the numbers and they stay on the road and they carefully wedge the doors as they enter each room in the dungeon and search methodically for secret doors. All that stuff, and like, I don't want to take away from other people's kinds of fun. If you really like an elaborate research management exercise, that's a kind of fun. It is a kind of fun. And we're chuckling.
It's a lot of
about it,
video
but
games for that
it's
these
true.
days.
It's a kind of fun. This is a different kind of fun. This is where, like, hey, there's a temple in there and you think there's someone in danger. That means we're going in guns blazing because my flaw is does not think things through. Right? And then suddenly everything gets exciting. And that's kind of where improv shines the most, is when everybody's like collectively agrees, this is going to screw stuff up real good, but it's going to be great. Let's do it.
Session 0 is when your characters are telling you what they want to do and how they want to be challenged and how they want to fail. In a live play that I GM called Little League, littleleague.com, if you want to check that out, it's delightful. The whole idea is that it's essentially a group of Little League baseball players in a world of horror, and for some odd reason, they're the ones responsible for saving the world over and over again. And so it's an incredibly dangerous world, but the reason why we're able to live in that world is because, one, there's trust between the players and me, the GM, because I have told them repeatedly, the only way your character dies in this thing is if you choose to die. So like that creates a baseline level of you're just not, the dice aren't going to do you in. You're going to do your character in some big epic display.
And the number of people who will be like, that's not okay. Like, because people in real life, people die. You're playing an elf. Come on.
Yeah. But the reason why I bring that up is I think Little League's a really good example of trust building between players and GMs. But the other reason why is all the players in that game have created characters that have made it very easy for them to get in trouble. And they're willing to do that because they know I'm not going to kill them. What I will do instead is dramatically reshape the world every time they fail and layer all kinds of consequences in which, Newton, Massachusetts is destroyed or something like that. But what happens is they're now in a space.
Newton okay? What happened?
No, Newton's fine. Newton's totally fine. Newton's great.
There was such a gasp from the room. I was like, did something happen?
I was going to go to the mall later. But so because there's that level of trust, every time I say, all right, there is now like a spinning vortex full of screams, one of the characters will say, oh, I'm going to jump in there. Oh, you want to roll it? No, I'm jumping in. What a gift that is. And that's what happens when you do not punish good ideas. So that's one of the end results of a trust building. So what else do we want to say about kind of building that trust?
Can I tell a quick story related
sure.
to this? So I'm running a campaign right now, which is a game called Only War, which is set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It's extremely crunchy. It's extremely dice-driven. It's a combat-oriented game, and it's extremely deadly. And I've formed all the player characters, all the players. I will kill your character at any time for any reason. However, everybody gets 3 characters, and they play a whole platoon. And they've lost a bunch of them at this point. But one of the players with one of his characters is using a psychic, and he, during this huge battle, starts using his psychic powers really irresponsibly. And in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, this is very, 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 very bad. And he's destroying the enemy, but he ends up rolling, he just happens to roll like a demonic incursion.
And even those that don't know 40K are like, oh, that sounds bad.
It's bad.
Uh-oh.
It's bad. It's very bad.
We're picking it up
And
through
so
context.
at
It
that
was
moment,
a pleasant demonic incursion. No.
at that moment, that breaks the game, right? Because the game had originally been a campaign against the orcs on this deserted planet, and there's all this stuff that I had set up that I thought I was going to do. But then we got this demonic incursion coming in, and I have a choice. I can either say like, well, you know, it's just like one demon, whatever. Or I can go all in and fundamentally change how the game works, and it goes from being mill sci-fi to survival horror. And I'm like, we're going survival horror, guys. And all the players at the table went, cool. And I'm like, yeah, all right, so now it's getting really weird. And like those kind of moments, which seem really scary, as a GM, if something happens you're not prepared for, and this is literally what I did, it's like, okay, guys, I think this game is going to fundamentally change. How about we call the session early, and then I'll see you guys next week, and I will have planned shit. So I have some idea of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because that's allowed.
Yeah, that is totally allowed. Like, you're not the be-all, end-all for all answers. You'd be like, oh, I don't know what happens next. Like, what does the table think? Like, you can ask people, and you can stop the session and be like, hey, we're done for today, because I don't know where this is going next, and I need to plan. And that's okay. Or like, have a 5-minute bathroom break while I think something through. So many times the GM is on the spot, like, oh, I need to do this right now. You don't. Take a minute. Take a breath. You have that time.
You're still the GM if you say, give me 5 minutes. No one's going to take away the GM-ness from you. So give yourself that time to respond to these amazing offers that your players are making. So we've been talking a lot about kind of trust and building that world, but once that's built, the question for everybody is, what do you do with it? What are the improv techniques that you try to use in your games? What are the fun tips and tricks, either really big or really small, that you use to kind of infuse this kind of creativity into your stuff?
I have a very mechanical example, which is like I mentioned that I run fully improvised, like 1 and 2 session games, and I have players who just aren't comfortable with improv or being put on the spot and having to make a decision. We create at the start of our sessions a giant bowl of adjectives or nouns that they can just pick one out, and it'll inspire their next step or the next thing that we encounter. And sometimes just something like that, it's still improv, it's still you're following your foot, and it's something fun that someone created at the start of a session. But like, if you're worried about going into a session and not having inspiration for like making a cool choice, give yourself a little bowl of inspiration at the start and pull from it as you need, as a very mechanical suggestion for something you can use.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Also, you got like 5 other people at that table, right? You don't have an idea, ask them. Say, even if you're the GM, right? Like, oh shoot, like something awful is supposed to happen right now. All right, everybody, give me your best ideas of like what crazy nonsense could happen. And then, you get 3 or 4 of them, you put them on a D4 table, and you roll. And then that's what happens.
You can even do this without asking them explicitly. As a GM, this is one of my favorite tricks, especially for like long-term mystery or conspiracy investigations. Is like the players or the PCs uncover something weird. They start speculating about who's behind it. It's like, oh, maybe it's that cult leader that we ran into last session. Like, no, it's the evil sorcerer king who's like pulling the strings in the empire. It's like, no, it's those hobgoblins we ran into before. As the GM, I have no idea. I'm picking.
Go on though, please.
I'm picking whichever of those sounds coolest, and I'm waiting a session until you forget about this, and then I'm revealing it.
And then your players think you're a genius.
Not only that, that's not the important thing, though. It's not that they think I'm a genius, it's that they think they're geniuses because they figured it out themselves.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think one note about just how to set up notes for a game that's this loose is try not to think in terms of like a linear plot. Think it as like you're building a sandbox game, right? Like you've got a setting where they are, set up a bunch of major power players, a bunch of factions, a bunch of places you can go, rough relationships and things. But it's not your job necessarily as the GM to move that all in a particular direction. You're going to throw the players in the middle of it, give them somewhere to start, and then they're going to push it in a certain direction, and then you just react. And you've already got sort of the world drawn out, so you're like, oh, they're going in the direction of like those, cannibalistic dwarves. I guess we're going to do that. Yeah. So and you kind of roll with it.
That inflexibility can be such a problem, especially for the GM. Like, I remember years ago, I had this whole thing set up in a town. There were zombies in the town. The party's going to go to the town. And they were like, we don't want to go to the town. We want to go to the lake. And I was like, go to the town. Like, screw me. Why can't there be zombies at the lake? Like, just move the zombies to the lake, whatever, right? You've got to remain flexible with that kind of stuff. Don't push your characters in the direction they don't want to go, because it creates that adversarial relationship.
Even if you want to do a really linear story, there are ways to infuse that sandboxiness and that flexibility. The term I use is gates. So I think of it like, a sandbox with a gate, and then on the other side of the gate's another sandbox, and then a gate, and then a sandbox. So let's say it's a session in 3 steps, or an adventure in 3 steps. Step 1, find out where the kidnapped person is. Step 2, get the kidnapped person. Let's say you're gonna, so the story's gonna move on the second they find out where the kidnapped person is located. Now, I, as a GM, if I want to plan the heck out of it, they're gonna go to a bar, and the bartender's gonna know, but they're gonna have to beat the bartender in a drinking contest, and so it's gonna be a bunch of constitution rolls, and one of them's gonna get it. Or you could just say, okay, all they have to do is find the location of the person. So, all right, you go into a bar. Hey, everyone at the table, give me 1 sentence about this bar. Well, the bar's abandoned. Oh, well, there's no bartender then. Well, that doesn't matter. Because all we know is that they're just going to get through that gate the second they find the thing, find the location. All right, tell me what else about it. Well, there's a giant spider in it. Cool, but the spider's friendly. Oh, good, all right. So, now great, we have a giant abandoned bar with a big friendly spider in it. Then you have to say, all right, players, all you know is that somewhere in this bar is the location of this kidnapped person. So, players, what do you want to do?
Let's talk to the spider.
Yeah, we're going to talk to the spider. The first answer your players give you is the thing they want to do the most.
I feel like this ends with us being in a drinking contest with the spider.
It absolutely ends in that way.
Right?
But that's what happens is, if you say, oh no, you get bartender and this and this and here are all the characters. No. All you have to worry about is, when are they going to check the box if they found the location? Let them do it however they want. And so you can string together 5 or 6 of those, and to you as a GM, it'll still feel like a nice, fun, linear arc, but you're letting them play in every sandbox along the way. So that's my own tactical example. What else we got?
I can still talk if you want.
Yeah. I got more too. So this is an exercise that I find helps build trust for players who've come from more adversarial games, where you'll get players who start making a plan for something and then either second guess themselves or get second guessed by someone else at the table. Like, oh, okay, I can sneak in while this guard is walking the perimeter and loop the keys off their belt, and then, let us in the gate that way. And someone else at the table will shoot down like, no, that's a dumb idea. The guard's going to notice when I get back to the top of the gate. And the phrase I come back to in this instance is the dice will tell us if it's a good idea. Like, your character has 1,000,000 levels of stealth. Yeah. The people at this table don't. Like, you don't need to be a super skilled commando ninja. You rolled up a character that's a super skilled commando ninja. If you're telling me you think you're good enough to sneak in and lift the keys off the guard's belt without them noticing, and you've got, I don't know, depending on the system, like enough levels of stealth to pull it off, then yeah, who are we to second guess that? So, getting over that notion of the players having to have the smartest possible idea for each other and letting them follow what they're interested in, to come back to Austin's point about the sort of flags on the sheet that tell you what they want to do. And what the system allows you to do builds trust and builds energy.
I do think I agree, but I do want to add another layer to that, which is that There is also an extent to which saying yes can make things too simple. And therefore, like the phrase in improv is yes and sometimes in a like game setting, I like to use yes but, which is to say, yes, you can do that. However, I am going to add this complication. And that complication is intended to open up the opportunities for things to get what I think of as interesting, which is like the most interesting things happen when your characters encounter obstacles that they don't anticipate. And if we go a little too far down the everybody has good ideas road without adding complications, sometimes the game can come right around again and be a little too streamlined. Like it's like, oh, well, we need to break into the vault. And then someone's like, well, I have this idea. And they roll the die once and then we're in the vault. And you're like, well, that's fine, but like this was supposed to be a bank heist. And so we want to add something to make this a little more chunky of an aspect of the campaign. Because I think one thing that sometimes can get swept under the rug as we talk about improv is the extent to which the GM is also supposed to have fun, and that the GM is also playing the game and is a equal member of that experience. And when players do stuff that is creative and interesting, but also like means your adventure's like right away over, the GM is entitled and in fact encouraged to add complications to continue to make it interesting.
There is a concept in improv also about sharing the stage. And I think that's also important for the table. The only time I wouldn't tell a person who's like, oh, I'm secretly the prince of this long lost country. It's like, well, you're also, the wizard and this, and like, we want to share the stage as well. Give other people a chance to participate. I remember in a game, actually I'm in Austin's Only War campaign. It is a lot of fun. And we took a silly tangent that kind of became the main story. And I was like, hey, can we retcon and just loop this other character back in so that one person isn't sitting here silent for 2 hours? And Austin was like, oh, yeah, let's go back.
He was laid up because he had a broken hip and third-degree burns over the lower half of his body. But we're like, you know what? He should probably get better just so the player doesn't have to sit there.
Yeah.
You're welcome,
That's
Fish.
him, yeah. Yeah. We literally wheeled him down the hall. It was great.
So the interesting thing about all of this is, you've kind of got all of these tools, like all these tools you can use. And the one thing to keep in mind as you're listening to all of this is we're not saying that for you to have like an improv-inspired experience, you must do all of these things. The nice thing about improvisation and how you let it affect your game is that it really is pick and choose. If you want if you want to take a little something from this and use it, just have the players name the occasional character. It's like, oh, you're going to this place to meet, your handler for this heist. You've known them for a while. What's their name? Okay, cool. And just say one thing you really like about them, and then they'll tell you both. Great. They have improvised. You have improvised, and you could still keep this whole thing on rails just as you want. Or you can say, all right, well, you're walking into a city. What is the name of the city? Describe the city. Give me 5 characters from it. You can scale it up as much or as little as you want, and it still counts as doing improv, really.
Yeah, asking questions is a great way to just get people all on board to telling the same story. You do that all the time in the games that I've played with you, and it is so fun to sit there, and because you're sitting there, often like being a player feels like I am receptive, I am waiting to be activated. I am waiting until I hear all of the things about this town, and then my character will activate and I will make a decision. And in reality, you can also be invested, just as invested in the town you're going in the room you're exploring, in the flavor of oh, it looks like people scratched their initials with a little heart on the wall in this booth. I wonder who was sitting here the other day. Little environmental flavor, feel free to add that, and you should ask your players to add that, because that is what makes the world interesting and gets people invested.
And it's such a sweet relief for the GM to not have to do all the work.
Yeah.
It really is. You're sharing the load. And there's this expectation, I think, sometimes on GMs, like, oh, they got to create it all. It's all on that stack of papers, or it doesn't exist. Like, no, you're making it up anyway. Have some help. Take a second to think.
And if players get hung up on stuff like names, because I know that's one area where I blank constantly, it's an easy way to ask that is just little game details that are spelled out in other mechanics but not spelled out in the fiction. So using D&D as an example. All right, my paladin activates smite for this hit. Cool. What does it look or feel like when your paladin is smiting? Like what's the signifier there? And like they might never have thought about, oh, it's there's this angelic choir that sounds in the background whenever smoking. Like, all right, awesome, good to know. Or like
I just love that. Just as that the angels all singing about it.
Yeah. Or like, what's the cleric spell that augury, the spell that gives you advice? Like, all right, what does it feel like when when your patron or your god gives you a yes on the augury spell? What's the sensation of that? And that gives you details you can play with later, because like once you've established what a yes is, like being able to say like in a game I ran a while ago, this was a hearth cleric for whom the yes was like the smell of freshly baked bread. So I'm like, okay, that's a good note. That's a fantastic setting detail. That also gives me interesting ideas for what happens next session when you get a no. It's like just noting that down is something to play with.
Yeah, and it incentivizes the player to do that more. Like when, weeks from now they roll it again, and you as the GM say, yep, and there's that smell of fresh baked bread, they will get goosebumps. Oh my God, yeah, they're right. Another thing that I like to do, and it's a trust building thing, and also if you're very used to, and your players are very used to, kind of that adversarial or untrusting relationship. Obviously, we've talked a lot about how you can overcome that, but one fun tactical example that reminded me of is every so often you're in a group or you're running a group where the players just do not trust the NPCs. They just assume that every NPC is like, oh, and this kindly NPC who gives
Kindly kill him. I killed him.
No, he's going to betray us. He gives you muffins and his social security number. No, he's a murderer, and we got to stop him. One of the best things to do is have your players describe the backstory with this character. Put it on them. Don't say, oh yeah, no, this kindly person, he's helped you before. Say, okay, no, what relationship do you have with this person? Like, was this person a mentor? Was this person a ship captain of yours? What was it? Oh, yeah, well, he did this together. Oh, okay, he saved your life once. How'd that happen? Oh, he did this. You saved his life once. How'd that happen? And all the players kind of contribute to this stew, and then they're going to trust the stew. They're going to trust it any more than you can give them. So that's just another way to kind of bridge that divide in an improv way.
And there's a lot of games out there that structure this in the format of the game. Like Fate, for instance, is a pretty good example of what you just described. You have to do that with all the other characters just as you're making characters. I mean, I guess you don't have to, because everything in these games is sort of malleable, but there are a lot of tools out there and a lot of games that lend itself to this kind of play, and some games that don't as much. And so there's going to be a variation to which you can use some of these rules and not all of them, depending on what you're doing. Some games are very, very structured in some ways that if you violate that, suddenly you're not really playing the game anymore. It doesn't really work the way it usually would. So I also encourage a lot of people who want to look into playing this way to also read a lot of games, don't just stay in D&D forever. There's a lot of other games out there that really, really open up the toolbox in a lot of very helpful and interesting ways. And you can mix and match stuff together. Like you can take aspects of other games and put it all in the same game and suddenly get not just improv in terms of like your player action, but also like improvising actually the structure and mechanics of the game in a way that's very interesting.
Indeed. So we have, let's see here. Oh, perfect. We've got about 16 minutes left. So let's do a little bit of Q&A. We'll probably have time for maybe 5 or 6 questions. So if you have one, the microphone is right over there. And as a reminder at the very beginning, anything you say must end in a question mark, because that makes it a question, and then we will do our best to answer it. So, yeah, you're up. Let's hear it.
Mic check. Okay, yeah. Hi. So you guys were talking about the trust and using that trust. So for context for my question, I was GMing this game, I had two players staying in a room together, and their backstories state that they have history with each other. Like each race was at war with each other, and they actually were, as by chance happens, they were at the same battle. Anyway, so one of the players was having a nightmare of said battle, and the other player kindly hit him on the head, but it's just like when the first player was in a fear-induced panic.
Sure.
And so I just rolled with it. I was like, all right, boys, here's combat. And so the rest of the party really loved it. The second player did not, and therefore I broke the trust. How would you say as far to regain the trust but also respect the trust in a role-playing manner, in a improv role-playing manner? Because it was just like you are in fear. You wake up, you see a giant. You were attacked by your enemy.
Yeah.
And
so
and
let me jump in. I've got a super quick answer, and then if someone else wants to hop in as well. Generally, like the thing that was probably really tough there is that was character on character violence. Like when two characters roll dice against each other, I generally try to stop that from ever happening. However, sometimes, we've all probably been in a game where that has. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to roll dice and you're going to do damage to each other and all of this stuff, because that erodes trust rapidly.
Yep.
Whoever takes the first swing, I talk to the other person and say, okay, does that swing hit? No dice. Okay, player A, you're having a night where player B is freaking out. Player B is taking a swing at you. Player A, describe the rest of this.
Yeah.
Let the person decide whether or not they're going to take the axe strike.
Unless both players are into it,
Yep.
which is totally a possible thing. Unless both players are like, yeah, let's scrap. You should just cut to the end of the combat and say, like, this is how it turns out. Because the actual going through the mechanics of combat, and given how long combat usually takes in most game systems, one of the players is just going to progressively have a worse time, and the other player, hopefully, who is fighting with this person, will also start to have a bad time as they realize the other person's having a bad time, and then everybody's sad. So it's like this person's crazy, they're coming after you. You guys fight. How's it turn out? And just sort of leave it there and let them negotiate it, and then you can get past, and then probably, as long as the one person isn't like, I kill him, you say, okay, something less than that. Like, less than kill him, but more than nothing happens. Where do we land? And I think you can negotiate.
Instead, you shave his head while you sleep. You know? Oh.
Awesome, thank you. You're up.
How do you support and encourage improvisation while reconciling and balancing that against 5th edition combat? If wizards have things like fireballs and paladins have smite, how do you make improvisation feel viable without throwing off the balance of what 5th edition combat presents to us as like the structure of combat?
I love it.
Lot of different ways to cast a fireball, right? What's your fireball look like? You know, okay, it's a big ball of red flame. Okay, cool. You know, could it be that you have like a giant head over your shoulder that belches green flame? You know, like you can mess with that kind of stuff. Yeah. And, you know, you also can, any rule that you don't like, it's your game. You don't have to have that rule. The only thing the players want is for things to feel fair, even if they're not, right? If you're like, hey, before we sit down, I hate this rule, I hate rolling on this table, I hate this thing, so we're not gonna have that in these 5th edition rules. You're the boss. It's okay to say like, hey, we're not gonna use this rule, I don't like this table, or, you know, this combat's just gonna go this way. That's okay, because it's all in the name of streamlining it to something you wanna do.
The other way to add that in mechanically, if you want to add it in on a mechanical combat level, is 5th edition does have, I think it's in the DMG, like some sections on like sort of improvising roles in the moment for things that fall outside the traditional like attack hit combat window. It's not very extensive, and the fact that I can't remember where it sits is indicative of how important they think it is. But it's there. And the one way to introduce that, and again, this requires trust in your players and a little bit of control, is to have enemies do it to them. Like instead of orcs just piling on someone and hitting, being like, okay, the orc who's up on the landing is going to kick the brazier over and spray glowing coals all over you. Everybody make a dex save. And like that's not something that has a traditional like attack block format, but it gets the players thinking like, oh yeah, you described like braziers of coals in here. We could use those as environmental things, or like big hanging curtains that we can swing off of, or stuff like that. Having the NPCs.
Well, there's no curtains in here. There's no curtains. Sorry. You can't swing. I'm sorry. There's no curtains.
If the player ever asks if there's a chandelier in the room, just go ahead and give them a yes.
There's a chandelier. Yeah. This cave has a chandelier.
Because they're gonna do something awesome with it. They're not gonna like, I want to light the 3 candles that are out. You know.
But yeah, having NPCs do it to them is one of the quick, in D&D particularly, is one of the quickest ways to get PCs thinking of what they can do in response.
I would just add, one, it's okay for someone to shoot a fireball and like have that be the thing that happens and they deal their damage, and so that makes combat move faster, and sometimes combat takes forever.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like also, if you're in a room and someone blasts a fireball, like you can add environmental consequences to things like that happening. Like the ground is probably really freaking hot. Like, I don't, like you can, or the air feels smoky, or, I mean, don't have to add like a million different mechanics that players have to roll against. But, you know, that thing doesn't happen and then nothing else is changed other than the one target that, you know, ended up getting impacted. So,
I like to sling, in D&D 5th edition anyway, I like to sling conditions around a lot. Exhaustion for one thing. They're not perfect mechanics, but they're mechanics that exist. They're modular. They make combat more interesting very often. Usually makes it more difficult, but it creates complications that players have to overcome. And as long as you're fair enough, if you're going to start doing this, by the way, you got to start also giving people saving throws. So like, you know, the fireball exploded. You know, you passed your dex save, but some of you might be blinded by the smoke. Make a, I don't know, wisdom save or constitution save or something. And then you can suddenly build, as we were talking about, build upon the environment in ways that the rules already have built in, just by handling it a little faster and looser.
Yeah, heck yeah. Awesome, great question. So for these next few, what we'll do is one of us will have kind of the only word on it, and we will do it.
Yeah, more questions.
You're up. Let's hear it.
I have a quick anecdote and then my actual question. My anecdote is I ran a one-shot campaign where I made all the NPCs and locations by asking AI Dungeon, and I had to roll with it. And it was some of the most fun campaign I've ever ran.
Nice.
My actual question is, someone said something earlier about something comes up as a result of improv, your players forget, and the GM goes, well, could use that later. I have sort of the opposite problem. Campaign's been going on for 5.5 years now, and I've wrote and planned a lot, but I also have improvised and said like at various junctures. The problem is my players take really good notes. One of them has a 600-page Google Doc, and I've read it a couple times, and it's pretty extensive. How do you balance yes ands or yes buts with then later not having to say, well, it just doesn't work this time, or you made a call in the past that undermines and makes a later less fun or interesting?
Which brave panelist wants to speak on this?
I'm really very sorry.
Yeah. I did this to myself. So.
I think what's important is the relation. If you've been playing a game with people for 5.5 years and you're all still enjoying each other's company, I imagine you have a pretty good rapport at that table.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty simple enough for you to say, look, guys, I totally forgot about this. And that clearly breaks what we're doing right here. So, like, maybe we could take a pass on that particular thing coming up. Or you can go the other direction, and then suddenly you start to create exceptions to the rules, and then things get really complicated. But you're in a 5.5-year-long campaign. That kind of stuff just comes with the territory. So good luck.
Thank you.
All right, you're up. What's up?
So the question I wanted to ask is, you talk a lot about letting people come up with like these creative decisions, and a lot of times that's always associated with a dice roll. How do you balance the, how do you allow characters to be okay to try stuff and not be afraid to fail? Because sometimes failing can be fun as well, but it can also be detrimental if like a rogue just messes up picking a lock, for example.
So I'll take this one if you don't mind. There's an expression I really like, and that's that GMs get to cheat and players get to win. Right? So GM it's okay to cheat a little bit and be like, hey, this is happening now instead. Or like now, I've got to add, more challenge to here or subtract it there. Sam, I want to hear what you had to say.
I was just going to say, question what actually needs a dice roll. If you have a character that is probably going to be good at a thing, sometimes just let them do it.
And then have them describe it in an awesome, epic way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, sometimes they're going to just defeat the next 20 goblins, so we don't have to spend the next hour to do it. Just have.
Awesome. All right. I think this will be our last question. But thank you all very much. Let's hear it.
Sure. So for newer players or players that are less experienced in improv or players that are perhaps more expecting to be part of a story that's told to them or a part that they're interacting with, the idea of, sometimes asking them like, oh, what name a quality about this town or that sort of thing. How do you deal with those players who are unfamiliar or perhaps unwilling to do that and respond with, what are you talking about? Aren't you the DM? Isn't that your job?
I love that question.
If I would say, one, build that expectation at the start, and kind of what John said earlier, you can cherry pick to what degree you're improvising parts of your campaign. Also, I have done in the past, I have had one-off, in between session, collaboration, storytelling moments with a player where you give them kind of separate space to say, hey, we're going to visit your hometown. Describe to me a little bit what that's like. And sometimes having the pressure of not being around a bunch of people having to make improvisational decisions gives them creative input into the story, but doesn't have them on the spot making a decision that they might feel pressured to make. So it's one mechanical suggestion is use that time in between sessions to collaborate with your players.
One-on-one improv.
Do I have time to jump in on this? Because
All right.
It's relevant to.
I love it.
So yeah, if it's a new player who's scared of improvising, scared of making things up, scared of being creative, start with something on their character sheet that is important to them. And even in not even talking about 5th edition D&D with inspiration and such and bonds and flaws, although that helps. If someone builds a rogue, they want to do sneak attacks. That's inherent to the character concept. If someone builds a wizard, they want to do fireballs. They care about that because that's what they did. So start with some minor mechanical detail there, sneak attack, with a dagger. How exactly are you sneaking up behind them? Are you getting them in the ribs? Are you getting them across the throat? What's going on? Just that little bit, and they care about it because that's the character they built. That should be that can be your entree into opening them out of their shell and getting a little more.
I love it. So awesome. Great question.
Thank you very much.
So thank you to all of you who asked questions. Those were all great questions. For those of you that haven't, I would recommend, here's a shameless plug, Blittle League is a great live, but here's why I bring it up, is because attached to Blittle League is a Discord that's full of lovely fan art, but also we talk about this stuff all the time there. So if you want to kind of continue the conversation, the Blittle League Discord's the place to do it. Okay, so with that, we've got about a minute left, and that is just enough time for all of us to have one more salient piece of advice for everybody. So if there's one thing you want these folks to remember, now's the time. Also, feel free to take a picture of that. This is a collection of some of our favorite advice for doing this panel for years and years and years. So with that said, let's start from this way this time. So John, what's something you want to leave them with?
I'm gonna stick with the thing I said before. The dice will tell us if it's a good idea. Encouraging people to play to the skills or traits of the character that they built, rather than deciding that they, as the humans sitting at the table, have to come up with the same idea that their fictional avatar would. Trusting the character that they built is a way to encourage them to create more ideas.
Awesome. Bobby?
Sure. My favorite definition of stupidity is trying the same thing twice and expecting different results. If you like what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And if you don't like it, don't do it. If you're like, oh, I hate rolling on this table, stop. Stop.
Love it. Love it. Sam?
Yeah, just like improv, the stuff that happens, the scenes that play out at a tabletop gaming session, it's only fun if you care about what's happening, both as a player, that you care about what happens to your character, that you care about the GM's story, and as the GM, that you care about your players and what your players want to do. If any of those pieces is absent, you don't have as much fun, and you're gonna have more combat, but not the fun kind.
Austin.
I'll be really quick. Trust each other and get in trouble.
Yeah.
Love it. Everybody, thank you all so much for coming to the Improv and Role-Playing panel. We love doing it. We love hearing these questions. We love talking about it with all of you. Have a great rest of PAX, everybody.